and welcome to the Shared Path. I'm Maggie Linton. I'm very excited to chat with my next guest, multi-award winning and best-selling author Leah Johnson. Her debut novel, You Should See Me in a Crown, was named one of Time's 100 best young adult books of all time. Her latest, Ellie Engel Saves Herself, is Leah's middle grade debut and also a real winner. So very pleased to welcome Leah Johnson. Welcome, Leah. I'll tell
Thank you so much.
as you are a brilliant writer, your comedic timing is just fabulous. And before we're over, I'm going to read just a small little paragraph or so of your interview. I mean, you're writing about Ellie Engel, but her best friend, one of her best friends, Bree, who becomes a best friend. And that's what's so very important. I have to give you props in particular for using the English language because, as we said just before we started, I tried making it through many of Toni Morrison's books. I don't need to let my mind hear them, but I love the way you use the English language.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. I think I went to grad school to study writing, and in MFA programs, there's often this emphasis on like how complicated and convoluted can we make our sentences and how fanciful can we sound. And the reality is the stories that I love most are the ones that I can connect to the most. And a huge part of that is giving people accessible language. I don't want my books to feel like they're untouchable or it requires you to have a thesaurus next to you to understand it. I want to write books for young people that they can see themselves in and understand.
Well, I wore yellow today in honor of that yellow
I
room
love it.
that your mom painted for you and your sister years ago to stimulate the imagination because
Oh my goodness.
your imagination has been stimulated and you are sharing it with the world, especially young people who need such an uplift right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, it's hard to be alive at any time. Being a human is hard, but it's especially difficult, I think, to be a young person right now with as much access as they have to um, social media and these ideas of what the ideal person is supposed to be and these images of who they're supposed to be. They're being inundated with this stuff constantly. And so I really try to lean into, okay, how can we ground ourselves back in what it's like to be a normal, regular, flawed person?
The other thing that I appreciated about your book was, and I realized the the magnitude of everybody finding their specialty, and everyone is special.
Mhm.
And you do it in such a wonderful, in a sense, comedic way at too. Because I'm from the Midwest, I'm from Kansas, okay, where we had tornadoes. I know
Mhm.
tornadoes. Earthquakes, no, but I
Yeah.
realize that they can happen anywhere. So let's talk about where your imagine came from with Ellie Engel saves herself.
Sure. Yeah. So I started working on Ellie when I was quarantined in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house. And I was
Is it
surrounded
still
by all
yellow?
the this one is it's tan now. It's tan. It was a really ugly color of tan. And so very boring, no imagination getting sparked in that room. And I was surrounded by all the books that I loved the most as a kid and all the stories that made me fall in love with reading to begin with. And I wanted so badly to disappear into that feeling again where anything was possible. And Ellie arose out of that desire to feel the magic in a story like I used to feel when I was younger. And it came together so easily. I was shocked at how quickly I wrote it. I was like, man, if every book was this easy, like this would barely be a job. Like,
But I can tell you enjoy it. When did you know that writing was where you belonged?
okay, I'm gonna keep it real with you. I knew at a very young age that I wasn't gonna be a scientist. I wasn't gonna be a doctor. I didn't have the skill set necessary. and the skill set being math. I couldn't do it. And I was like, we have to lean into the things that we're really, really good at. And when I was a kid, I was good at getting people to pay attention to me, which was a nightmare for my teachers. But I was also really good at just making stuff up. And I decided to run headfirst into a life where I got to use both of those skills. And I thought that was going to be journalism for a long time. And so I was doing a lot of nonfiction storytelling. And it took until I was in a newsroom reporting on Black Lives Matter all day, every day, thinking about the brutalization of Black bodies, thinking about what violence against Black folks from the police does to us, what it means, that I was like, I can't possibly continue to do this work and feel the way I feel all the time thinking about this stuff. So I was like, how can I talk about Black people who get to be free from fear and free from shame and free from violence? And that's when I was like, we're going to go back to fiction.
Well, you have knocked it out of the park. I can't wait to read more. And the fact that you are targeting young people to give them that uplift and show them that their phones are not their best friends. You know
There
what I
is a
mean?
world outside of there is a world outside of your phone. I will
Yeah.
say I was raised in the early days of social media, and so I too had my years of being married to my family's desktop computer. It was back when we used to have to plug the internet in with the phone cord. Like I've been there, and I developed a lot of really important skills and relationships through those social media sites and through writing fan fiction and all these communities that I cultivated digitally. But I also recognize that the way young people engage with the internet now is much different than it was when I was coming up. And so figuring out how to navigate that difference is so important, but it's also something I think we don't talk about nearly enough within our books.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive into Ms. Ellie Engel,
Yeah.
because she is what I would call very much like so many children in this world, the child of a divorce. And you talk very openly near the beginning about how that affected her. And there are so many kids that are still weathering that storm. And then we talk about the neighbor, Abby Ortega, who helped her so much. But let's begin with Ellie and
Mhm.
that special person that she is.
Right. So Ellie believes herself to be really boring and ordinary, right? And so part of what this story is showing that Ellie doesn't have to be the side character in her own life. She doesn't have to be the sidekick to her best friend her entire life. She too deserves a big story. She deserves to be treated like she's the center of something. And I think that that's a story that we don't get to see nearly often enough. In my reading growing up, I saw so many Black girls who did not get to be the heroes, did not get to be the main characters. We were just there for comedic relief. And Ellie's journey is understanding that she deserves more than those images and ideas and stories that have been projected onto her her entire life. She has greatness within her, but she just needs to tap into it. And so that's sort of what we're getting into over the course of the story. There's some twists and turns and a little bit of necromancy in there, but that's what I was really interested in exploring.
Well, you have knocked it out of the park. I'm telling you, it is just beautifully written. And I'm so excited about you kind of fulfilling the need that's out there. Let's talk about Ellie's best friend, Abby, whom she looked at with shining glory, that Abby was the outgoing, it's like the introverts and the extroverts, and Abby was definitely that because her family was that too.
Right,
The
right, right.
Ortegas.
They're chaotic and they're loud and they are all in the house vying for attention, which is a huge difference from Ellie. Ellie's an only child. She's the product of divorce, and so she lives at home with just her mother. She's a single mom. And so it's very easy as a young person, I think, to define yourself in opposition to the people who are around you. So because they are this, then that means I must be this. Because they move through the world this way, I have to move through the world this way. And so cultivating that relationship between those two friends and figuring out like, okay, just because you're different doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the way you navigate the world. And it doesn't mean that the way she does it is all that great, because Abby has her issues too. But it takes Ellie a little while to see that because she's in love with her. So there's also that.
Yeah, that love is a very special love, and she keeps it secret, really, because you never know when you fall in love how somebody's going to react.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you bring it out and work it through is also just something so very, very special.
Thank you. Yeah, to be a baby gay, I think is to have to deal with having crushes on people you think you shouldn't have a crush on and having to understand how you deal with that. And it's a really lonely experience sometimes, not knowing how to reckon with those emotions. And I wish that somebody would have given me a blueprint to dealing with that when I was younger, so I could have avoided having my heart broken so many times.
But you want me to tell you something? In any kind of relationship,
Mhm.
there are always the exceptions. You're going to have your heart broken so you know
That's
what you
true.
don't want. It doesn't matter what kind of persuasion you are. It's
Hmm.
learning to understand who you
Yeah.
are and your needs being met.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I
it,
agree. It took me a while to learn that, though. It took me maybe too long. Maybe that's why I'm writing the books, is because I'm still trying to figure it out.
it'll come to you, definitely. All right, let's talk about, I have to talk about Bree because that's coming up, isn't it?
It
Bree is that
absolutely
very
is.
special, unique person.
That's my
Well,
girl.
talk about Bree.
That's my girl. So Bree is, if Ellie has resigned herself to being a sidekick in her own life, Bree is like, I don't even want to be in the story. She's like, don't even look at me, don't perceive me. She is a extremely bookish Black girl who is under a great deal of pressure because she has parents who demand excellence from her, and part of that demand is cultivated in this sense of anxiety about not being good enough, not being smart enough. Um, and exploring Bree's story a little more in her book is something that I was really, really excited to do, because her and Ellie are so similar, but the way that those similarities diverge, it makes all the difference. Whereas Ellie is a little bit snarky, a little bit more free spirited. Bree is very closed in on herself, and her friendship with Ellie, the way that Abby and Ellie's friendship made Ellie open up a little more, Ellie is able to do that for Bree, which has really been it was a fun thing to navigate.
Right. I want to read a section in your book about
I would
Bree
love it.
because Bree doesn't smile.
Never.
Okay. Let me just read it real quick because I think people will understand how you use words in very descriptive ways that puts pictures in her head. Okay. This is one of my favorite sections. Oh, Brie Hay. She gives me the tiniest little lip twitch because Brie never really smiles. If she had a superpower, being stoic would probably be it. Once in second grade, a spider fell from the ceiling into Justin Murphy's shaggy red hair. And he screamed so loud, the windows practically rattled while he danced around, and everyone had dropped and as if every ice cube had been dropped down into his pants. He ended up knocking over the class ant farm, our bean sprouts in the windows, and our teacher's computer monitor. It was the funniest thing any of us had ever seen. We laughed so hard, we cried. And then Carrie Bell peed her pants a little, which made us laugh even harder. You nailed it. The ant farm, I thought of the ant farm that I had when we were in middle school.
Yeah,
The computer monitor, they were huge back then, right? You couldn't help but knock
yeah,
that over.
yeah.
Little plants along the walls as we would do experiments. You nailed it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a lot of, it's just, I had so much fun with this book. That's the thing is like every time I read the book aloud or somebody else reads it aloud, it almost feels like an out of body thing. Like, whoa, who wrote that? That's kind of good. Because I was just playing around, I was writing the scenes that felt the most visual to me that like leapt off the page and I could see them playing out like a movie as I was writing. And it was such a delight to be able to do that with a character like Ellie who sees the world the way that Ellie sees the world. And so I'm really glad that Disney was like, yeah, go ahead and write another one so we can stick with this for a little while longer because I don't know how to let these kids go. They're so much
Yeah.
fun.
Disney gave you the hookup, huh? And came back for more. Not
They
everybody can
did.
say
They
that.
did. I
Disney
know. They
had
were like,
their,
you know what?
yeah.
Stick around. They said, stick around, girl. And so we're gonna go until they kick me out.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the mean girls. Because there
Yeah.
are some, it's like, why do people have to be so mean?
Hmm.
Why?
Yeah. That's that's the question I've been trying to figure out my entire life. I think part of it, especially in middle school, is that everyone is so awkward and uncomfortable. They're trying to project an air of authority. They want other people to think that they are all together. And a lot of times that results in them being mean to each other. It's like if I point out your flaws, then nobody's going to notice my flaws. If I establish dominance, then I can be in charge. And, there are all these wild dynamics at play in middle school. And that's one of the things that I wanted to dive into in this book. And a lot of times, you'll have a villain. I don't think that the mean girl is necessarily the villain. She's just a kid who's a
Yeah.
little
In
mean.
search of her own self.
Um, Right, right. And that's the thing. She's dealing with her own set of issues. And you can tell as you read that if you are coming at it from a certain age, certain perspective, you can see so clearly that like, oh, this girl is so insecure. And you can't see that when you're 12 years old. You don't know that that's why the bullies around you are behaving that way. And it was like healing my inner child, forgiving myself for all the things I didn't know about the people who were around me.
But the other thing you pointed out is how often they kind of dress alike too, or they have the same backpacks. I'll never forget one day I was sitting at a stop sign and all of a sudden there were about six girls who came across all kind of dressed alike and things like that. And I'm going,
Mhm.
that's the reason why this sounds crazy, but I never joined a sorority because I didn't want to
Mm,
dress like everybody else and be like
right.
everybody else. Because my parents always said, be your own self.
Hmm.
And you nailed it with the backpacks and
Thanks.
everything else.
It's funny now even when I go to the stores because I can see this about my former self when I look back on pictures. But when I go to stores now, I was at the mall the other day and there was these tweens standing around in the Forever 21 and all of them had the same white Air Forces that were all beat up. They had the same jeans with the same holes in the knees, the same cut, the same t-shirts. And I was like, wow, we really do find our people and then just sort of become like the people who are around us. It was so fascinating. And that does not change from generation to generation. You can go back in time and in my grandma's day they're wearing bobby socks and them little those little shoes. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, the black
we
and
all
white.
have exactly like we all have our what is of the moment. And that is like what it's like to be a kid. Either you assimilate or you feel isolated. And that's the tough thing about middle school.
Yeah, it really is. It's a very tough thing about middle school, but a lot of times that lingers on into high school too. And
Yeah.
that's where a book like Ellie Engel saves herself, and I got ready to say the world herself, really can help people get over some of those stumbling blocks and come out positive on the other side. Because if nothing else, other than the comedy and the uh, great English, there is an uplifting spirit of saying, be your own self that just shines right through.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think books are a social good, and I think that they can act as blueprints for possible futures. And what I want to do in my work for my readers, but also for myself, is to imagine futures that are better than the ones that I have been prescribed. Like when I was coming up, we didn't have stories where queer kids got to be main characters, where they left the story without being harmed in some way, or black joy that doesn't have to come in exchange for trauma. These are the kinds of images that I was inundated with so much in my youth, so that I'm trying to rectify a lot of that in the work I'm doing now, in hopes that it creates a broader picture for young people to know that, like, this isn't your lot in life. Your lot in life is not trauma. Your lot in life is to be free and foolish and joyous.
You got great teachers in there too. Mrs. Wilson in particular. Boy,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
she
I had
gets
to
it.
give a shout out to these teachers because teachers saved my life so many times. And uh, shout out to Miss Peacock, who was my fifth grade and sixth grade teacher, who was the first person to put a notebook in front of me and say, write something. You got something to say. If it weren't for those teachers, I don't know where I would have been. So I try to slip as many good adult role models into a book as I can.
Well, you definitely have done that with Ellie's World, but you also put emphasis on being someone who searches out not only for the good, but to learn more, not to be afraid to learn. Because you talk about the kids in the advanced classes, but there are, at every level, there are learners.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I went to a school visit recently where one of the librarians told me that the principal wanted only to have the highest achieving students, right? And high achieving when you're in school is often only reflected in grades. But if I was only ever evaluated by what I was able to do on a standardized test, I never would have gotten here.
Mhm.
Somebody looked at me and said, you have something bigger, broader to say than what is reflected on a Scantron. And so I was so glad when that librarian was like, I had to push back because the kids who need to see you and hear you the most are not always going to be the ones who are pulling in the best grades or who are already national merit scholars by the time they're 8 years old or whatever the case may be. Um, I really want to create books and environments in my books that show kids that all of us have our own superpower. And sometimes your superpower is not going to be academics. It could be something else, but you have your thing and you have your way to tell stories, and we need to hear that too.
Talk about your illustrator because
I
the
am
books
so
came,
lucky that
comes
I
from that.
got I know. I was so, and I had nothing to do with this. All I said was, this is what the character looks like. Run with it. And the artist for the cover, her name is Morel Ortega. She's a brilliant, brilliant artist. She does picture books often. She has a book out now called Magic, and it's so beautiful. And my cover designer, his name is Tyler Nevins. He works for Disney. I just got really, really lucky with the design team on this book. They made something magical.
They certainly did, and it truly is magical. And as I think back to the cover, and also, I got a book with the cover on it, but took the cover off, and there's some great stuff on the back.
I know. I didn't realize that they were gonna print it that way.
Yeah.
And when I saw it, I was like, Oh my goodness. Like we get our own comic strip on this. It's the
Yes,
most beautiful art object.
it really is. It makes it special. You're on tour right now. So, and you've got a lot more coming up. Talk just briefly about being on tour.
I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired. I've slept like 3 hours in the past 4 days, but I am so, so grateful to be able to be back in rooms with people physically again. My first two books came out during the height of quarantine, and so I didn't get to go out on tour. So I'm tired, but it's worth it. I'm excited to be able to hang out with readers and get a sense of what it feels like to be on the road like a real writer.
Yeah, well, I am so excited to be able to talk to you. I know we're quickly running out of time, but what's ahead? Let's talk a little bit about um, because you write for so many different groups, including a lot of magazines, Teen Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Cosmo, plus many others. You are just writing all the time, huh?
I am. I write a lot. I write a lot, but I do it one because it's my job, but two because it's the thing that I love the most. I love telling stories, and whether that story is nonfiction and it's coming from my own life or it's a novel, I'm always going to find my way back to the page. So yeah, I feel really really lucky, and I have Bree Boyd is a Legend, which is the sequel to Ellie Ingle Saves Herself. That's out next year. And then in 2025, I have a book, my next YA novel. It's a rom-com co-written with my friend George M. Johnson, and it's called There's Always Next Year. And I'm really, really excited about folks being able to see those next two books. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, writing with someone is a little different, but
It is. It is. I have never been good at group projects, but one thing about writing with George, it's so easy because they're so smart and so funny and so generous that I want to show up and really give it my best shot, even though I'm used to being alone writing by myself in a dark room. So it's been an adventure.
just to give us some final thoughts about the path that you're taking with your books and how it opens the world for so many kids who need it right now.
Yeah, we're in an era where there are so many conversations going on around the country about what stories kids should and should not have access to, about what types of identities kids should and should not be allowed to call their own. And my hope is that with every book I write, I'm able to liberate more and more of us from these ideas of who we're supposed to be. Um, I I need that for myself, but I think now more than ever, we need to be reminded, young people need to be reminded that who they are is better than okay. It's perfect. And they should be able to use the language that they need to use to describe themselves without being limited by people who are afraid of anything different.
There you have it, folks. Go check her out. Her website, beautifully done and is very uplifting, is by Leah, and that's Leah Johnson.com. By Leah Johnson. You see it on the book right there, by Leah Johnson.com. You can also find her on Instagram and Twitter, and go get the book. Because the book, and go get all of her books, okay? And we can find it,
Read
I know,
them.
through disneybooks.com, but many other locations too, including Amazon.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you buy the book on bookshop.org, you can support independent bookstores all over the country, which is my passion. So shop on Bookshop if you can, stop into your local bookstore if you can. They're the best. I love booksellers.
All right. Bookshop.com. Thank you so much for joining me. And folks out there, let me tell you, you really want to get her plugged in, especially if you have some young people who really need the help right now. Get them off their phones, get them into a book. Until next time, seek peace, spread lots of love. I'm Maggie Linton.